academic journals. I'm Rick Liu, Vice President of the Sales and Marketing Asia Pacific at IOP Publishing. We are so happy to have this opportunity to share our knowledge with you today. We have about over 300 attendees for the Asia Pacific region registered for the webinar. I think some of them will come later, join us later. And I appreciate your interest in the topic and talk very much. I also want to thank you, our partner iGroup, for the supporting the talk and the promoting it very well. Our speaker is Eileen Tan today, Associate Director of Publishing at IOP Publishing. She is responsible for the growth and development of IOP journals publishing program in Asia Pacific, including management of the publishing team based in Tokyo and Beijing office. Eileen will present about 4 hours, and we will have a Q&A session after his presentation. Please feel free to type your question in the chat, and we will answer that after Eileen's talk. Okay, let me pass it to Eileen, and hi, Eileen, over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rick. And I would also like to thank iGroup for organizing this event and inviting me here. Good morning, everyone. As Rick says, I'm Elaine Tam, Associate Director for APAC and Partnerships at IOP Publishing, and I'm based in Singapore. Today, we have joining us for this workshop researchers from Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, Korea, Japan, and Australia. And I'm really delighted to welcome all of you to our publishing workshop this morning. Today, I will be sharing more information with you on how you can publish your research work in a scientific journal. Of course, I sincerely hope you will consider submitting your next paper to one of IOP's journals, but the information in today's talk will be relevant to almost any journal. So here are the topics I'll be covering today. First, I will give a quick introduction to IOP Publishing and our publishing program. Then I'll talk about how you choose which journal to submit your paper to and what you should consider when you're writing your paper. Then I'll spend some time on the peer review process, followed by copyright and permissions, publication ethics, what happens in the post-acceptance, as well as the post-publication stages of the process. So before we start, I'd actually be really interested to find out how many of you have heard of IOP and our journals before. So I'm going to try launching a quick audience poll here. Should be on your screens now, so that we can find out just a little bit more about you. So please let us know by clicking one of the buttons in the poll, and we'll just give you a moment to respond. Okay, I'm going to end the poll in just a few seconds. Thank you so much. So it looks like around a quarter of you have heard of IOP Publishing, and 75% of you have not. Thank you so much for your responses. So this is a good segue for me to go into a little bit of information about who we are. So the Institute of Physics, or IOP, is the learned society for physics in the UK and Ireland. And they were first established nearly 150 years ago as the Physical Society of London. IOP Publishing is the publishing arm of the Institute of Physics, and we are the largest society publisher in the physical sciences. All of our profit or surplus is given back to the Institute to support their charitable activities promoting physics around the world. Our publishing company is headquartered in Bristol, UK, and we have around 400 staff worldwide, including teams in China, India, Singapore, and Australia. We are a global business with 95% of our authors and customers based outside of the UK. Now, we offer publication options to help scientists communicate your research throughout the span of your work through our journals, books, conference proceedings, as well as our science news publications. Our journals portfolio includes over 100 journals, including partner journals from international learned societies and research institutions. We also publish books. Our collection has nearly 700 titles published, with around 100 new titles every year. We also have 3 conference proceeding series that are the largest journals in science, collectively publishing over 70,000 proceedings articles last year. And we are extremely proud of our science news program, which is a key part of our mission to communicate world-class research and innovation to the widest possible audience. What you may not know is that our portfolio of publications offers multidisciplinary coverage across the physical sciences, essentially going into areas anyone with a physics background might work in. So while 36% of our overall journal content can be found in more traditional areas of physics, such as astronomy and astrophysics, nuclear and particle physics, and so on, we do have journals that are relevant to faculty in engineering, materials, biosciences, mathematical sciences, as well as a rapidly growing program in environmental sciences. And we are proud to count publications from nearly 100 Nobel Prize winners in our journal archive content. And we have world-leading journals in various subject categories, including these 14 journals, which are in the top quartile of their impact factor categories. Now, our journals come from across the globe, with around 45% of authors from Asia. So if you aren't yet an IOP author, I hope that you will consider joining our community. So before we go into the next section, I'd like to find out how many of you have already published a paper in a journal before. So let me just launch this next poll and really be interested to see your responses. Okay. Thank you very much. So currently it looks like just over 30% of you have already published a paper in a scientific journal, and 70% of you have not yet published a paper. So let's go on. The first step to publishing a paper is choosing to submit your paper, choosing a journal to submit your paper to. There are more than 20,000 journals globally, so you do have a lot of options, but this is not a decision to be taken lightly. First of all, you should submit your work to a paper trusted by the scientific community you are in, because honestly, not all publishers can be trusted. There are many fraudulent, predatory publishers that put out fake information about their journals. For example, you may see that editorial boards have big names that you recognize, but sometimes some of those people may not even be aware that their names have been associated with those journals. They may also market their journals as having impact factors, when in reality, those journals are not even included in the Web of Science database. So make sure you know the publisher you are working with. Find out more about the journals, the scope, the reputation, speed of publishing, and so on. The selection of journals affects how you prepare your paper and how you write your paper. So it's best to decide on the journal before you start. So here are some factors that you might wish to consider. First of all, who are the readers of your journal? You might be able to gather more information here from who is talking about the content from the journal, publishing, and citing the content in the journal. Are they people within your peer community? This will help you understand if the journal has the right audience for your research paper. Next, take a look at the scope of the journal and ask yourself, is it relevant to your paper? Is the journal in a niche area or a broad scope journal? If your paper is highly technical, then it might be better to consider a journal that is more specialized so you reach the right audience. If your paper has a broader appeal within a subject area or even multidisciplinary relevance, then consider whether a broad scope journal might be more suitable. You can also consider the types of papers published in the journal to see where your paper would fit in best. So please read the scope statement of the journal very carefully and make sure your paper is of relevance to the journal, because if your paper is out of scope, it will be rejected immediately. Next, consider the editorial board of the journal. Do you see names that you recognize that are relevant to your research area? The editorial board should reflect the scope of the journal and is also a good reflection of the reputation of the journal. Board members at IOP play an important role in setting the direction and quality of the editorial content of our journals. You may also wish to look at the impact factor of a journal and understand its position in the field. There may also be other quality criteria for the journal, such as the quality of the peer review. For example, how many reviews does a journal require? What is the acceptance or rejection rate? At IOP, our average rejection rate is around 70%, although we do have journals that are higher or lower in their rejection rates. What is the speed of publication? We know this is a very important consideration for researchers, especially early career researchers. Every IOP journal homepage will tell you the median time from submission to first decision, both before and after the peer review process. After acceptance, the average time from acceptance to online publication is less than 25 days. You might also need to understand what is the publication model of the journal. So is it a fully open access journal? Is it a subscription only? Or is it a hybrid model, which means that it's a subscription journal that offers open access options for individual articles? And how you decide may depend on your funding requirements, as you have to consider whether your institution or funder has any particular open access mandates. And finally, also consider any associated costs for publishing in the journal, whether this might be for page charges, color figures, or open access article processing charges. You can visit this website. It's called Think, Check, Submit, which will help you identify trustworthy publishers for your work. Most of the information I mentioned on the journal can be found on the journal's homepage, including the scope, publication times, editorial board information, and publication charges. Now, when thinking about the potential impact of a journal in its field, you might be looking at the impact factor of a journal. And it's important to understand how a journal's impact factor is calculated. So the impact factor for a journal in a given year, let's say 2020, is worked out based on the number of citations in 2020 to articles published in the 2 years prior. So in this case, 2018 and 2019. The total number of citations is then divided by the total number of articles published in 2018 and 2019, thus giving you the average number of citations in 2020 per article. You should only compare journal impact factors within the same subject area and understand their relative positioning. Some of the factors you might consider also when determining the potential impact of a journal is looking at article downloads, as well as other types of metrics such as social media mentions or news coverage. For example, if you look at this paper that was published last year in one of our journals, Journal of Physics D, this article has already been downloaded more than 40,000 times. It's been cited 65 times and has already received multiple social media mentions. You can look into this here, including Twitter and YouTube coverage as well. Next, let's look at your open access options. Now, traditionally, the majority of journals operate using the subscription model. For these journals, libraries will pay the subscription fee to provide access to their users, but the journal is usually free for authors to publish in. Authors are generally allowed to self-archive their accepted manuscripts in a public repository, such as your institutional or funders repository, but there may be an embargo period of, let's say, 12 months before making the accepted manuscript available. And this is known as green open access. Increasingly, there are more and more fully gold open access journals. For gold open access, the final published article is made freely available upon the payment of an article processing charge, or what is known as the APC. APCs are paid to the publisher, by the author, or sometimes the funder. And typically, the article is then published under a CC BY license, which allows reuse of the article for both commercial and non-commercial purposes, subject to proper attribution. In most cases, the copyright here is retained by the author. Now, many, if not most journals are now hybrid, including all of IOP's subscription journals. What this means is that you have the option of publishing your article open access within a subscription-based journal. IOP has many open access agreements now in place with institutions that allow authors to publish open access at no cost to them. Most of these arrangements are in Europe and North America at the moment, but we are having multiple live discussions across institutions in Asia. Now, before you start writing your paper, you should also find out about the submission requirements for the journal you have chosen. At IOP, we aim to make the submission process as simple as possible for authors. You do not need to follow a template or a fixed format, although we do provide templates if you should prefer to use one. We will accept any relevant supplementary data that you'd like to include. And if you have submitted a preprint to archive, you can upload the file directly to our submission site from archive. During submission, we will only require a PDF file from you, and we only need your source files in Word or text format after the revision stage. You can find out more information on each of our journal homepages under the author guidelines. And if you need more information, I highly recommend going to our publishing support website. This is a great starting point to find out all kinds of information about our journals, guidelines for authors, templates, submission checklists, and so on. So I'm going to take a quick pause here for another audience poll. And next, I'd like to find out how many of you are planning to write or submit a paper in the next 12 months. So here we go. Let me know what your plans are. Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Now it looks like over 80% of you are planning to write or submit a paper in the next 12 months. That's really, really good to hear. And this leads us nicely into our next topic, which is writing your paper. So before you start, review your main results. Are they novel and significantly important? Do they fill a gap in the research? These are some of the questions you'll need to include in your cover letter, for example. So here you should consider what your choice of journal requires. Some journals may be seeking only the most significant and cutting-edge research, while others may just seek original research based on sound, technically rigorous scientific methods that would add to the body of existing research. So you should decide on the key message of your paper and prepare an outline or structure for your paper, including the headings, topics, context, and significance. The structure of your paper should include the following sections: the title, abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, acknowledgements, references, as well as figures. And supplementary material may also be included if you think it's useful for your paper. Now, the title of your paper. This is going to be the most visible and most read part of your paper. So spend as much time as you can perfecting this. It should be concise yet informative and attract the attention of the reader. Try to include some keywords which may help enhance its discoverability in a Google search. Keep your title as simple as possible, but make sure it is clear and descriptive and not ambiguous. Try not to use acronyms that may not be widely understood, and don't attempt to be witty in your title. Next, the abstract. And this is the second most widely read part of your paper. If people are attracted to your title, they will read your abstract to see if they should invest time to read the rest of your paper. So think of the abstract as your shop window. The abstract should summarize your paper in one paragraph, so less than 300 words. This abstract that I've shown here has about 150 words. So, you can be as succinct as you can. And then also make sure you include your key result. What did you achieve in your research? Your abstract should also include keywords and phrases and help the reader understand what makes your paper worth reading. Including keywords, especially in the first two lines, first two sentences, will increase the search engine discoverability of your paper. And we know that most people come to our website directly through search engines or Google searches directly to the article page itself. So this is really key. Briefly summarize your aims, methodology, and findings in your abstract, but don't copy your introduction and don't use jargon or undefined acronyms here. Don't exaggerate your findings and don't mislead the readers. Next, we have the introduction. This section should describe the main goals and advances and provide an overview of the methods used and set the work in context of previous research findings. Make sure you cite all relevant references. In the methods section, make sure you provide enough information to enable others to reproduce your results. In the results and discussion sections, demonstrate the significance and impact of your results, and if relevant, compare your results to other published work. Here you should also discuss the implications and applications of your work. And in your conclusion, you should summarize your major points, highlight the novelty and significance of your work, and also include any plans for future work. You should also recognize the contribution of your funders, grant information, etc., as well as any other assistance that was rendered to you in the acknowledgement section. You may also need to include an ethical statement, particularly for articles that report research involving humans or animals, or let's say stem cells. And last but not least, your reference list. Make sure you include the right references, and this means any references that are relevant to your work and what your research builds on. This should include original works that are historical as well as recent. Check the reference list for accuracy so that you can ensure that anyone who wants to look at one of your citations is able to do so based on the information that you've provided. You can try to follow the reference style of the journal, but if there isn't one, just be consistent. For IOP journals, it doesn't matter what format you submit your reference in, we will ensure that your references follow the proper styling during the production process. Now, your paper will almost certainly include figures, diagrams, or charts. These should be representative, clear, and well-designed. Try to use captions to ensure that your figures are self-contained. Include any key terms and try to avoid any acronyms if you can. You might also think about how your figures may be used to represent your paper and your work, perhaps as a journal cover image or used on a social media post or other news item. Now, before you submit your paper, you should try to get feedback and comments from your supervisor, your co-authors, as well as other colleagues, even if they weren't directly involved in your research. Their input will help you improve the paper and help save time during the peer review process. Do get help from a fluent English speaker if you think you need it to improve the readability of the paper. And if you would like some professional assistance, we have partnered with Editage to offer language services for our authors. So to summarize, here are our top 10 tips when writing up your research. Do check existing literature for similar results in your field and use references to show the context of your work and why it is new and significant. Decide whether you are writing for a specialist audience or a non-specialist audience. Your paper should be written in a way that is easy for your audience to understand. It is best to know in advance which journal you want to submit your paper to before you start writing your paper, and make sure you invest a lot of time on your title and abstract. This will be what most people see first and how they decide whether they want to read your paper. Keep your abbreviations or technical terms to a minimum and make sure you clearly define them when you first use them in your paper. Avoid speculation, exaggeration, or anecdotes. Remember that your fellow scientists will be reading your paper, so keep to factual information and clearly state your conclusions. It is best to keep your paper as clear and concise as possible, even when there are no word limits stated. And make sure you use your own words. Do not copy and paste sentences or descriptions wholesale from other sources, even from your own previous papers. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the later section. Get feedback from your colleagues because oftentimes it is helpful to get an external perspective, and allow plenty of time for rewriting. It's important to ensure that your paper is complete, readable, and easily understood. Okay, it's time for another little break. And before we go into the next topic, which is peer review, I'm interested to find out how many of you have been asked to review a paper before. It doesn't matter if you're invited directly by the journal or asked by your supervisor to help review a paper. So I'm going to launch the poll now. Let us know what your response is. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to end the poll. It looks like about 30% of you have reviewed a paper before, 70% have not. So that's really useful to know. So we'll talk about the peer review process next. After you submit a paper to us, it will undergo a peer review process. And this is the process whereby experts in the field assess an academic paper before deciding whether or not it should be published. Peer review is a really vital part of scientific publishing because it provides a critical filter for millions of research papers that are written every year. Essentially, it gives the scientific community as well as the public a reliable indicator on trustworthy information by checking the scientific rigor in the work. Additionally, it also provides authors with expert feedback from their peers to help them improve their work. And finally, it also helps editors select high quality content to publish in their journals. The success of peer review depends on careful and critical examination, and yet early career researchers are often asked to review papers with no formal peer review training to provide them with experience and competency. At the end of 2020, IOP launched our peer review training and certification program to help bridge this gap, offering a mix of online workshops hosted by experienced reviewers and digital learning for researchers to go through the course in their own time. And this is a comprehensive and rigorously assessed program that's designed to increase the trust in the process and standardize the quality of the peer review across the physical sciences. The course covers the challenges and responsibilities of peer review, as well as publication ethics. Over 8,000 reviewers so far have been awarded the IOP Trusted Reviewer status, which demonstrates exceptional peer review competency. So this next slide shows a brief overview of the peer review process. When the manuscript is first submitted, our editorial team will first check the paper to see if it meets the initial criteria. And I'll go into this in more detail later on. We call this the pre-referencing stage. After this, the paper will be sent to reviewers for peer review. From the peer review stage, there are 3 possible outcomes: accept, reject, and more often, a recommendation to revise the paper. The revision will go back to the same reviewers, and if it is accepted, then the paper will go on to be published in the journal. Now, there are many different types of peer review. Single anonymous, which is the most common form of peer review in physics. Double anonymous, which all IOP journals have moved to since 2021. Transparent peer review, open peer review, collaborative peer review, and post-publication peer review. And in today's talk, I'm just going to cover the first 3 types of peer review. Now, single anonymous or single blind means that the reviewer knows the identity of the author, but the author doesn't know the identity of the reviewers. This system allows reviewers to be more honest in their feedback, and authors do not need to anonymize their manuscripts. However, there is a potential for bias in this case, which could be either for or against the authors, or perhaps where the authors are based. There's also more potential for a lack of accountability from the reviewers. In double anonymous, the author doesn't know the reviewer's identity, and the reviewers also don't know the author's identity. At IOP, we decided to make this the default option for our journals, and we are the first major publisher in the physical sciences to do so. And the reason we're doing this is because we believe in the integrity of science and in the importance of assessing scientific work purely on its own merits. We hope that this will reduce the bias with respect to gender, race, country of origin, and affiliation, and lead to a more equitable peer review system. In all cases, it will be up to the authors of the manuscript to decide whether or not they want to anonymize their manuscript. Since the start of this year, 2022, IOP is also combining double anonymous with transparent peer review on all of our open access titles. Now, transparent peer review involves the publication of the complete peer review process from initial review to final decision. And this is done only if both the authors and the reviewers opt into this process. And if they are agreeable, alongside the published articles, readers will be able to see a full peer review history, including the comments in the reviewer reports, any editor decision letters, and the author's responses. Making this process visible to the community increases the accountability and allows reviewers to be recognized more for their hard work in the process. When we did an initial trial for this option prior to 2022, we found that roughly 50% of authors chose to disclose their reviewer reports alongside the published article. We feel that transparent peer review strongly complements double anonymous peer review, where the identity of the authors and reviewers is concealed. And the difference is that double anonymous peer review is applied before publication of the paper, and transparent peer review is delivered post-publication. Together, these two processes complement each other, allowing for maximum objectivity during the peer review process and maximum transparency after publication. So let's come back to the various peer reviewing stages. All submissions are first reviewed by the IOP editorial team. They will check the paper to make sure that it fits the scope of the journal and that the abstract provides sufficient information to allow them to determine the appropriate subject area expertise for reviewer selection. The language of the paper also needs to be good enough for reviewers to understand the manuscript. At this stage, we will run a duplicate check to make sure that it hasn't been submitted to more than one journal simultaneously, as well as a plagiarism check. If the paper meets all the criteria for the initial check, then it continues on to the peer review process. In this stage, the editors will also perform a quick analysis of the quality and content, comparing it to previous work to see if the work is presenting new ideas and techniques. Are the results incremental to what the author has done before? Do they confirm a result or show a null result? Will it advance the field significantly, or is it of archival value? If required, they may consult the journal's editorial board for the suitability of the paper. If the paper looks appropriate, then it will be sent on to referees. If the paper is not suitable, it will be rejected, or potentially if it is out of scope or doesn't meet the quality criteria of that particular journal it was submitted to, it might be offered a transfer to another journal. Reviewers are invited to review the paper based on their subject expertise, their independence from the work, their availability to perform the review in a timely manner, as well as their previous record of good reviews. We may also consider author suggestions for referees, but we will check for their independence and also check their identities to make sure that the contact information is real. If the authors have also included information on people they do not wish for us to contact as referees, we will also respect their preferences. For most of our journals, we normally require 2 referee reports. If the referees disagree, we will consult with an adjudicator, who is usually an editorial board member, if not a third reviewer. Usually this part of the process will take 1 to 2 months to reach a final decision. Referees will be asked to rate each manuscript on scientific rigor, novelty, and significance. It's unusual for us to have an immediate accept decision, although it does happen from time to time. But more commonly, authors are asked for minor or major revisions based on referee comments on the work. But rejection rates can be high, and usually over 50% in high quality journals. Now, if the first decision on your manuscript is for a revision, this is a really positive step towards acceptance. It means that the referees see merit in your work and that it fits the journal. They are providing you with advice on how you can improve the paper, so don't feel frustrated about this. What you need to do is make sure you read the referee's report very carefully and respond to each and every comment thoughtfully. Keep a list of all your changes and highlight them in the revised manuscript. If you disagree with the referees, you should clearly, but very politely, explain why. And if you don't understand a particular comment, you should raise a query with the editorial office, but never ignore a comment. Remember that your paper and revisions will be sent back to the same reviewers. And if you disregard one of their comments without responding, this will just hold up the process. Alternatively, they may feel that you didn't sufficiently address their concerns and recommend rejecting your paper. So following the revision, the paper will be accepted if the referees are satisfied with the revision. If not, the paper may be rejected, or you may be asked for further revisions. At this point, I'd like to ask how many of you may have had a paper that was rejected before. I think I have a little poll here. How many of you have experienced a rejection from a journal? Okay, thanks to everyone for your responses. I think about a third of you have had a journal paper rejected before. First of all, just keep in mind that everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, everyone has had a paper rejected before. So you should think about any comments you have received to help you improve the paper. You can also rewrite the paper and submit it to another journal, perhaps one that is more suitable for your work. As we've discussed before, there are journals that are more focused on the most cutting edge research, and there are journals that are focused on scientific rigor and less on the perceived novelty of the work. And finally, if you strongly disagree with the journal decision, most journals will have an appeal process that you can go through. On the other hand, if your paper has been accepted, congratulations. There will be a few more steps before your paper is sent on to the production team. You may be required to sign the copyright form, provide permissions information for the reproduced figures, upload your source files. And if you're publishing in one of our open access journals, let us know if you're happy to opt into the transparent peer review process for the referee reports to be published alongside your paper online. So at this point, let's move on to the copyright and permissions. What is copyright? Copyright is a type of intellectual property right that arises automatically and protects a work as soon as it is written down or recorded in permanent form. If a work is original, it is likely to be protected by copyright. It also protects a wide range of works. For example, copyright protects pictures, figures, photos, text, graphs, videos. And there doesn't need to be a copyright symbol next to the work for it to be protected by copyright. The owner of the copyright has exclusive rights over their work, such as the right to copy and communicate the work to the public. Therefore, you will need their permission in order to use their work. Now, copyright generally lasts for 70 years after the death of the author of the work or the last remaining co-author's death. Therefore, just because the work is old does not mean that it is protected by copyright. You may need permission to use any content that is not original to your article. This will include any previously published material, as well as any images you have obtained online. It also includes unpublished material created by someone else, or it could be a figure that you created. If you have included any third-party elements, such as a diagram or flowchart that includes an image from the internet, for example. If you are reusing content from a journal, you should be able to request for permissions online through systems such as RightsLink or the CCC Marketplace. Permission can also be obtained via email. There is on our publishing support website some useful email templates that we have provided for you. Now, the permission that you have requested should cover the following: reuse in a journal article, commercial reuse, worldwide use, as well as use in electronic and print formats. So when is permission not required? Any material that you have created yourself and which is original to your article will not require permission. Also, if you are reusing materials that have been published open access under a suitable Creative Commons license, such as the CC0 Public Domain Declaration, the CC BY license, which is commonly used in most, but not all, open access journal articles, and the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. Permission is also not required for any of your own previously published material where you have been granted back right of reuse by the publisher. IOP grants authors of our subscription journals the right to reuse their original figures, tables, and text abstracts up to 400 words in future published works. If you have published open access with us, then the articles will be published under a CC BY license, which grants reuse rights for both authors as well as users. Now, please note that different publishers have a range of policies, so it is important for you to check with the relevant publisher if you have any doubts. Before your article is accepted for publication, you will be asked to complete a copyright form. And in general, the copyright form will fall into two categories. If you are publishing in a subscription journal, authors are asked to transfer the copyright to IOP Publishing or to one of our partner societies if they own the journal. Authors are granted back certain rights, such as green open access rights or the reuse rights I mentioned earlier. And there are specific options for US government and articles subject to Crown copyright in the UK. If you are publishing in a gold open access journal, or on a gold open access basis in a hybrid journal, then you as the author will retain full copyright, but you will be asked to grant us, the publisher, a non-exclusive license under the Creative Commons open access license. Again, there are specific options available for US government and Crown copyright articles. Next, I'd like to take some time to talk about publication ethics. Ethics and research integrity in general is a big issue in publishing, and you may be hearing increasingly about high-profile retractions of papers in the news. Some examples of serious misconduct include plagiarism of other people's work or falsification or fabrication of data in an article. So why should we care about ethical misconduct? Well, such misconduct can have a huge impact on the research community. For the researchers involved, there can be serious damage to their scientific or academic careers, including those of innocent collaborators and colleagues, as well as damage to the reputations of their institutions. There will be a loss in the trusts in journals and research in general. There might also be corruption of data and information, and generally a waste of time and effort and a waste of funds that have been allocated to the researcher. If research participants were involved, unethical research may directly harm the research participants. And keep in mind that misconduct can also affect the general public, because a lot of times practices and policies implemented could be based on fraudulent research if undetected, and future research funding may also be misdirected as well if they were built upon this fraudulent research. So here are some examples of publishing misconduct. First, we have plagiarism, which is the substantial replication of significant elements of work from other authors without any attribution. At IOP, we try to detect this using Authenticate or through the peer review process. But another form of plagiarism that is less severe is self-plagiarism, also known as text recycling or sometimes incremental publication. And this is the reuse of significant, identical or nearly identical portions of one's own work without acknowledging or referencing the original work. This is often the result of scientific pressure to publish or a desire to squeeze extra publications from the same work. Or sometimes it may come down to perhaps laziness when writing a paper on a similar topic. At its most extreme, this could be an identical or nearly identical paper being resubmitted to another journal, or perhaps with a different title. We also have data fabrication or image manipulation. And this is the fabrication, falsification, or misrepresentation of data or results. This is really difficult for us to detect, but sometimes it is picked up during the peer review stage and flagged on post-publication sites like PubPeer. And then there are different authorship issues. Now, authors should ensure that all those who have made a significant contribution to the work are cited as co-authors. An author is someone who has made a significant intellectual contribution to the article. And this can include, but it's not limited to, the background theory, design of experiment, device prototype, data analysis and interpretation, writing of the article or reviewing, and or revising the text or figures. Now, other individuals who have contributed to the study in a lesser capacity should be acknowledged, but not necessarily cited as co-authors. There are cases whereby people are listed as co-authors on a paper, even if they have not contributed to the research or even seen the paper, and sometimes these are known as ghost or gift authorships. There are some possible reasons for this situation. They may think that adding a particular name may increase their chances of publication. by using the prestige of a famous name. They may be trying to honor a colleague or the head of their group or institution. Or they may be even compelled by a senior member of their team. Potentially, they are using data from a person they may not have rights to, and they may be trying to mask plagiarism by adding the plagiarized author as a co-author. And in some cases, there's just some misunderstanding, honest misunderstanding about the publication procedure. On the other hand, there may be situations where authors have neglected to include someone as a co-author, even though they did contribute to the paper in a significant way. Now, a variation of this is authorship for sale. And this could involve real papers in the system before publication, where people can pay for a slot on the author list and get an instant publication under their name. Our editorial teams will be very cautious about new authors being added at a late stage of the review process prior to acceptance, or sometimes even post-acceptance. We also have to be wary of paper mills. And these are essentially companies that offer papers for sale to authors to submit as their own work. Such papers are usually either completely plagiarized or nonsense content in some cases. Peer review manipulation is another area of concern for publishers. This is an attempt to manipulate the peer review system, usually by suggesting fake reviewers or by providing fake evidence of peer review from another journal. And this is why our editorial teams tend to be very cautious about using suggested reviewers. If we do use them, we try to verify their identity and email contact very carefully, including verification from other journals if the peer review reports have been provided. A good paper should always include information on any relevant conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is when the author may have a potential reason why they are biased. Additionally, reviewers may also have a conflict of interest and should also declare it if so. Now, this situation can be very difficult to spot, but it might be detected in the funding statement or acknowledgements. And sometimes we're alerted by whistleblowers, although this is usually after publication. And finally, I'd like to touch on duplicate publication and parallel submission. A duplicate publication is when an author submits a paper they've already published to a new journal. A parallel submission is when an author submits the same paper to multiple journals at the same time. And this could potentially result in the same article being accepted and published by both journals, in which case a retraction of the second publication will be required, wasting a lot of time and resources in the publication process, and also causing some confusion in the scholarly communications. At IOP, we use cross-ref similarity check using Authenticate to check on all our submissions to detect situations of plagiarism. We are also a member of COPE, which is the Committee for Publication Ethics. And this is an industry body that provides advice on how misconduct cases should be properly handled. In summary, here are some tips for publishing ethically. Make sure you don't fabricate, falsify, or misrepresent your data or results. Don't add someone as a co-author without their permission, and don't add someone as a co-author if they did not make a significant contribution to the work. Don't sign any forms on behalf of your co-authors unless you're authorized to do so. Don't copy and paste text from other articles, including your own, and don't submit an article to more than one journal at a time. Now we're almost at the end of my presentation, so stay with me just a few minutes longer. The next part is the post-acceptance phase. After your paper has been accepted, the accepted manuscript will be made available on our website and the journal homepage within 24 hours and publish with a DOI number, so you can start promoting it immediately and it can be widely read and cited at that point. Meanwhile, the paper will go to our production team, who will edit and format the manuscript into the format and style of the journal. When this is ready, a proof is generated and sent to you, and you'll be asked to check these author proofs. At this point, please check for any errors which may have been introduced in the production process. After your confirmation, any corrections will be made and the paper will be published online. And at that point, you'll be informed and you'll also receive a link to your published paper. This whole process should take less than 4 weeks to publication. But what happens after publication? At this point, our marketing teams will be looking at different ways to highlight content published in our journals. And this is done through various ways: in press releases or through our subject community and journal-based campaigns, including emails, social media, and potentially print flyers at conferences. However, please keep in mind that you as the author are often in the best position to ensure that your article is seen by the most relevant audience for your paper. You know the community well, and you have frequent interactions with them, and people love to hear from scientists communicating about an area they are an expert in. So my final poll question for today: how many of you have used social media to share information about your work? Let us know in the poll. Okay, thank you, everyone. It looks like around a bit more than 30% of you have used social media before to promote your work, and 65% of you have not. So what are some of the ways you can communicate your work after publication? You can send an email to the people you have cited, as well as other key colleagues in your field, sharing a link to the paper. You can use social media to tell people about your work, such as Twitter, Facebook, WeChat, or Weibo. Use accessible language in your posts, and don't forget to use relevant hashtags and taggers as well. And finally, you should also update your profile on your institutional homepage and professional networking sites with a link to your published article. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience and attention. We've gone through quite a lot of information today, and I found that I hope that you found all of that very helpful. And I'll be very happy to take any questions at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. I think we have a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, one of them is, can I know if IOP also accepting review paper or just a new research paper? I think John also helped to answer in the chat. It depends on the specific journals. Most of IOP journal publish reviews and research articles and letters. Is that cover everything? Yeah.
Yeah, that's more or less correct. Review papers are usually invited, although if you want, if you are interested in writing a review, I would highly recommend you contact the publisher of the journal and propose your topic.
Thanks, Eileen. Yeah. Another question is about your slides, and they want to get your slide after talk. Is that okay? What's your thinking?
Yes, of course. That would be fine.
Yeah, I think we will produce that in PDF, and Miko can help to send it out. But Miko, can you have any comments on that? Yeah.
Okay, slides can be enclosed in our email confirmation, but according to our GDPR guideline, we could only send the email to the attendees who have chose to receive IOP marketing materials at registration.
Yes, all depend on the other attendees registered. Yeah, what they approve our GDPR request. I think the same thing with the certificate request, and we will produce a email confirmation, but all depends on the what you selected in the when you during the registration. Yeah, thanks for that, and then we will send the email confirmation and the slides in next week. Yeah. Another question is about what's the publication cost for IOP?
So we do have different costs for different journals. If you were to publish on a subscription basis in a subscription or hybrid journal, then usually there is no cost to publishing. But if you are choosing to publish open access, then different journals will have different APCs or article processing charges. If you go to the journal homepages, there should be a link on the right-hand menu to tell you what the potential publication charges are. And what is the index rating for journal? So I'm assuming you might be talking about site scores or impact factor information. And again, go to the journal homepage. You'll be able to get that information in there as well.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I think it's okay. Yes, no more questions. Yeah. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, everyone. It was so nice having all of you join us today.
Okay, thank you. So I will both people. Yeah, thanks for your time. Have a nice day.
Nice day, everyone. Bye.